your own voice so annoying to yourself?
Yes.
Like, whenever I listen to recordings of my own voice, it's so unfortunate.
Well, it's, I mean, really, you hear yourself from your own, like, head cavity, right?
I think.
Spencer Hicks, we are live, my friend. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Junkyard Love podcast. Today I have Spencer Hicks. This is actually the second time I had on the podcast, but the first time I deleted it for no apparent reason. So, Spencer, I'm happy to have you on here, man. You're just, you're one of my friends who's, I would definitely consider you a very intellectual person. And so you and I always have very in-depth, intelligent, wonderful, intriguing growth conversations where we learn, I feel like a lot of we're into a lot of the same subjects as well. So I'm excited to have you as a reoccurring guest on this podcast.
Yes, it's very nice to be on here. I really enjoy speaking with you.
Yeah, you definitely bring out the good in everybody around you, man. So today I think we should just dive right into, like, you came in with a couple things written down, and all three of the words that you wrote down, I was like, yes, yes, and yes. And those three words were...
I would like to define ego, consciousness, and mindfulness for people.
I would love to do all those three things. So I would love, if you want to start off, whichever of those three in your definition.
I will start with the ego.
Okay.
So people misinterpret the ego as more of what it's connotated with. Like, I had a conversation with an older gent recently, and I was like, well, you just need to step back and look at your ego a little bit and just, like, observe it. And he's like, well, I don't have an ego. Okay.
Oh.
Well, not the definition I was looking for. So it prompted me to write down this question. It's really just the self that you identify with, but it's not necessarily the true self. I would think that it's different with everyone you're with as well. Like, you could be different with other people, and that's just your projection of who you are, right, and what you're about. But it's not necessarily you. You don't always have to hold on to it. It's a very abstract concept that's not quite always easy to grasp. But once you get a hold of it, you get to see it more so.
So if you were immediately the question that pops into my mind is ego versus self. I mean, it seems kind of like you're talking about, like, this is me. Like, what are you saying? You know, the people who are listening are going to say, you're just talking about who I say that I am, right? My name, I'm Ashley. Like, what do you mean? I'm Ashley and I'm 14. I drive a pink bug. That's me. The self and ego. There's a little bit of a branch there.
Yes. So I would say that the ego is what you would most strongly identify as in general.
Okay.
So, like, all these anchoring physical things, like, I drive this is what I do, like, I'm a rapper, or this is my career. Like, these things are external things that you're anchoring yourself to that aren't necessarily you.
Right. Yeah, I always like the, you may know this analogy, Sam Harris used it in, I think, Waking Up, or one of his books. Essentially, if you take a car and you completely strip it down, completely strip it out, every single part laid out in front of you, like, where's the carness? Where's the car?
There's another one. It's if you have a boat and you replace every piece one at a time until it has all new pieces, is it the same boat?
Yeah, exactly. And so we think of, you know, our memories, the things that we own, the clothes that we wear, we think of that as that's who we are, but it's very hard to define.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so difficult to define ego and explain it to people, because it's very much so an extremely abstract concept, and it's much more fluid than people would let on, or that most people think. Like, you feel like, no, this is who I am. This is exactly who I am, but it'll always be changing, and it's something that introspection helps you to notice quite a bit.
Definitely, I agree there.
And I feel like I can only do that in silence too, because, like, a constant noise all the time, like always listening to something, I never actually get to interact with it or myself. I'm just kind of careening through my day.
Yeah. So what do you do? Are you talking like meditation? This helps you
even
get your ego in check?
Even just driving with no music. Just if you're in a headspace to, I don't know, take inventory, I guess, of your own mental processes. Yeah. Like that, just like that little chatter will keep you away from like digging into this. And I feel like that's why we're so far removed from seeing it, because it's so easy to be stimulated.
Yeah.
And I notice it sometimes too, because I'm always listening to stuff like podcasts, music.
Yeah, I can't even like walk to the next room sometimes, some days.
It's so unfortunate because like if my phone dies or I decide, hey, I'm going to drive to work, no music today. Like the amount, it's almost like a pen up,
Right.
like what has been holding back. Like all the stuff that it's been weighing like on me just is kind of released over 20 minutes. And you're like, wow, I mean,
Dude,
I just
totally.
then I think about, man, if I did this for more than 20 minutes, like if I just didn't have any stimulus for the day, how much would I mentally get done? Like how much would I figure out about myself if I wasn't always distracted?
Right. I think that what happens though is the barrier that our ego creates, kind of when silence happens, when there's silence, the barrier that our ego is creating, like reaffirming who we think we are through our phone or through our distractions, whatever, breaks down. It's like silence is like, okay, well now it's time to bring these things up. Let's picture reality here.
Well, and I drifted off a little bit. So back to the ego. Like Instagram's a very good representation of. I prefer to say an avatar than ego. It's a little easier to grasp. I mean, at least for me, like this person that you are on the internet, like that's definitely a form of ego. Like you're projecting this. Like this is who I am. This is my avatar. This is what I want people to see of me. But it's very curated, and it's really never how people are.
Yeah, it's not right. It's who we think we are. Well, it's who we think other people think that we are.
It's a weird dance.
Yeah,
it's a weird dance
strange.
to play.
So the thing about ego though is it starts, for me, it seems like anytime I talk about it with somebody who doesn't fully understand, which for me 2 years ago, I feel like I didn't understand the word ego fully, and I thought that I did, but there's an offensiveness to it. So I feel like when you say like, oh, your ego, or there seems to be this ownership, your ego, that people. It's silly because when they get offended if you say ego, or someone stops listening when you use the word ego, or bring it up, it's their ego that is putting that structure out. So everybody has an ego, Spencer, and I feel like I've read about it being kind of a primitive. So it's something that's left over from evolution, right? It's something to keep us safe. Does that make any sense to you?
It's definitely a defense mechanism to some degree, especially the incessant guarding of it. Like we as humans really just don't like change, and the ego can be incredibly fluid if we allow it to be. Like you can be essentially whatever you would like to be and whatever you want to project, but it's very scary to do that and to let go of like who you are, these things that define you, because now it's, even if these things are harmful to you, thinking about being someone else or doing something else is very hard. I mean, you hear people all the time say, well, like, I can't quit my job and go do this thing. Like, why can't you? Like, why can't you be someone new?
Yeah.
So I feel like as a society, it's extremely frowned upon to change in general, which I think is a big cause of the problem.
Yeah, we're kind of always taught that we're born to be who we are, like, and it's like, oh, my problems, I got to deal with them, so everybody's got to deal with them. It's kind of locks in who we think we are.
And I think the social connotation to the literal word ego is pretty rough too, like you mentioned earlier, just because it's connotated in a very poor light usually. Like, oh, like you got a big ego.
Yeah, I feel like when I hear the word ego, I picture some cocky dude, right? I feel like that's how I always used to think of the word ego. Some dude who talks about himself too much, or something like, oh, he's egotistical, or oh, he's got a big ego. I mean, that whole phrasing of how I used to use the word ego is just entirely incorrect. It doesn't grasp or explain what it is at all. Ego is, I think every single human on earth needs to understand ego. Ego is something that is very gripping to a lot of us, in just to participate in society and culture of today. Your ego is something that you have to have. Like you have to have it in check to be successful, I think, to be forgiving and not get caught up in every single cow shit that you step in, and every single little argument that someone is challenging who you think you are. And I think that ego is one of the most important things to fully grasp. I think that even, if you gain some sort of insightfulness from just listening to us talk about ego, I really encourage you to dive farther into the word ego. There's plenty of YouTube videos, plenty of searching what is ego on Google. The first thing that comes up is just wonderful. I'm for sure I remember doing it. So, yeah, man. So ego is quite a crazy thing, I think. How have you, besides silence, Spencer, how have you navigated your ego? Like, as you understand the concept of the word, as you understand yours, the people around you, how do you navigate ego?
I mean, it really starts with, we're going to get to another word, but a mindfulness practice or a meditation, because in order to change behavior, you must notice it first.
Right.
And if you never get to the point of noticing it, it's just moot. It's not even on your radar. So just when I'm navigating my daily life, a lot of time it's in hindsight as well, because it's just very easy to just instinctively react to things.
Absolutely.
And just, I don't know, be who you are, in quotes, I guess. But I will catch myself at the end of the day thinking about just the actions, not in a poor light, but just how did this affect me throughout the day, and how did it change my social interactions?
Right. Yeah. It's really good to be introspective at the end of the day. I think that's where I find myself. I used to just not have a handle on my depression at all. And so I would be introspective about my day, right? At the end of the day. And I'd be like, dude, you sucked at this. You sucked at this. But it was the real me disagreeing with what my ego self was doing out in the real world, or saying or talking about things that I'm just I didn't really want to act that particular way, or whatever it may be.
I think a lot of depression and whatnot really comes from the true self is a big ideological concept that might not even be a real thing, but acting in a way that doesn't abide by that, and then you said, realizing that is it's going to make you upset at some primal internal degree. You're just not, the way you navigate yourself with other people is just not in tune with who you are, or the frequency you give.
But being aware of it and being introspective, and just, whether it's taking the end of your night, whether it's meditating, wherever you can fit it in, what meditation does is it puts a little wedge in between, to where when situations happen, you can be like, oh, I don't want to act that way, or oh, my mind is thinking crazy, and I just noticed that it was. Mindfulness teaches you that skill for sure. So let's actually talk about mindfulness too.
Yes. So you give me your definition of mindfulness, Jake.
Oh. At all times, we're thinking. At all times. There's a million thoughts going through our minds. Knowing that and noticing that are two things that are profound once you realize that you can do that. I went 26 years of my life without really having mindfulness, knowing that at all times my mind is going a million miles a minute. I thought that whatever word, whatever feeling, whatever blah, blah, blah comes in, that's what happens. But being mindful of, I guess, the fact that I'm thinking all the time is mindfulness at the root for me. What do you think about that definition?
I like it a lot. I really like to look at it a third point perspective, a third person perspective on yourself. So in accordance to your thoughts. So you don't really get to choose what you think, but you definitely get to choose what you hang on to. And mindfulness, like you said, just puts that wedge in there. And you instead of that guttural instinct reaction to something and then following it, anger is an easy one to pick on, because it's so volatile and very easy to see. This was not a feeling that you chose to feel, but it's a feeling that you chose to feed.
Right.
So
if you're mindful, you can realize that you just fed that instead of just feeding it and asking for forgiveness later.
And then also in the same headspace, you really just get a look at, hey, why am I angry? Why is this upsetting to me? Am I rightfully angry, or am I angry because I'm protecting who I am, my ego, which can be very fragile, and it's very easy to somebody to say something that's off-putting to you, and it's usually something that's probably critical and you probably need to hear. Usually the things we get really mad about are usually stuff that we need to dig
we're trying
into.
to protect ourselves from pain at all times, right? In our minds, our brain is trying to protect ourselves, so it doesn't want us to hurt. If we accept those things about ourselves, or we really live those true beings, a lot of times that hurts. And so our ego is projecting out kind of the opposite, or we're like defending, like, of course I'm not like that. Because if you were like that, it would hurt a lot. And so your ego is like almost like a little scorpion tail. It's always working while you're looking down. There's a scorpion tail stabbing people, making sure they don't hurt you.
And I really think this with realizing the ego also helps you it not feel so bad when you introspect and you're mindful of yourself and you're like, wow, this is like really not acceptable behavior. And usually if you've got a very strong sense of self, that's going to feel really bad because it's an attack on your identity. But if you can hey, I'm not the person that I think I am, I'm like this fluid being, and then you react in a certain way or something is very off-putting or upsetting to you, instead of the guard, you got to look at why am I upset about this?
Right.
Why is this off-putting to me? And then instead of being beat up by the fact that you got upset by it, you know, can really realize hey, this is how I'm going to do better.
Right.
This is the thought process that got me here, and this is why it's unacceptable, but I'm okay with that.
Exactly.
I mean, not as in a contentment, but it's I'm not going to beat myself up over it, because I do see a lot of people that they're anxious or depressed or have pretty deep-seated issues, and if they just start digging through that, it just feels bad, and we will always try to avoid pain. All your biology is set up to just avoid pain.
Our society is set up to avoid pain, man.
Yeah.
The pursuit of happiness.
So I've actually done recent research, and it used to be pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain, and it's actually just avoidance of pain. That's a one thing that you do. Pleasure is a part of that.
Yeah.
Because it's the opposite, but it is 100%. Almost all of your decisions are to avoid pain.
Well, it's funny. You can follow all pain, annoyance, boredom. It all goes back to, let's say, fear, right? I mean, it's these emotions, and I feel like when you just follow it back, of course I don't want to feel this, because at my core being, all I want is the best for myself. I don't want to get mad and ruin my life because I yelled at someone. Why would I want that? I want the best for myself. So we have a lot of, I don't know, I guess posturing.
That's a very good word.
Our society is just so full of posturing. It's funny. I always try not to use the word society and culture over, because I just feel like people are going to widget a tinfoil hat on my head. But I don't know. I think that it isn't. I mean, why else are we having this conversation, right? It's something that's important for our culture, our society to know right now and be aware of. Because I'm victim to it myself. I have an ego. I haven't always been mindful. I can always be more mindful. Some days if I miss my morning meditation, I'm like, great, I'm not going to be as mindful today. Maybe I'm going to let my emotions get the best of me. And of course I don't want that. So it just happens to everybody. We got to work on it.
And I feel like it's very much so, it's such a Western problem, because Buddhism and Hinduism, I mean, I don't agree with Hinduism, the overarching structure of it.
Yeah.
But in Eastern culture, the emphasis on introspection is very much so held to a high degree. And we in the West, not so much. Whenever you speak to old people especially, their sense of self and their ego is just so stout. It's so incredibly inflexible, and you notice it, I mean, in their political views, they're so unwilling to change. And it's actually very unfortunate to see people that are very old, that have lived their whole lives and never been able to break the mold. This is who I am. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that what's happening though is we've had, the two generations that are happening, at the boot of technology. What's happening is this huge separation between these two generations who have we love technology. Let's say us and us being the top of the younger people, and then the people who are 4 years older than us who also kind of got technology too, right? The separation between our two generations, and old people, say 60 years old, who are definitive in their ways, very political. That separation, because of the technology, is is very apparent. And what's really putting a wedge between the conversation that needs to be happening, that's an open conversation where we can actually talk to each other, is the ego. And it's weird because it seems like it's the ego. Old people have a huge ego, but also there's young people who are doing what we're doing very wrong. There's young people who are also having huge egos, who are thinking like they're just throwing away every single thing that old people say just because they have a posturing, a stance against these people. So there's two different versions of ego with three different generations that are going head to head, and it's just weird.
It's funny because what old people told us the internet would do to our brains did to them. They will believe everything because it's like, oh, it's going to melt your brain. Like, you're going to believe all these crazy things. Like, they have incredibly poor opinions because they can't sensory gate because they just have intaken so little information compared to us, and they haven't lived in a world where they have like a massive distrust for like government and establishment. So they're very much so very status quo too. So it's like, we're so polar opposites. But I really try to not be upset or divisive or like pick team young people. It's like I genuinely feel very bad for these people.
No, it's terrible. I think, well, I mean, you and I were talking about this even before the podcast, is the nature of our being, whether we want it to be or not, I think is a bit of an advocate, a bit of a moderator, a bit of a, if there's two people arguing who clearly are just misunderstanding each other's opinion or what the essence of what they mean is, we are the type to try to be like, oh, no, just listen. Here's what you mean. Here's what you mean. Now have a conversation. Yes. So I think that, I guess us having these conversations is important.
A definition of terms, and that's why I wanted to start with that too, because the definition of terms is so incredibly important when you're speaking about things, because two people can be arguing the same point with different terms and be upset at each other.
Absolutely.
And that is not very helpful.
It's so foolish. It seems like, and now that I feel like the more that I learn and the more that I can really, really see it, the more that I sharpen that tool of this skill, like watching, like, oh, what does this person really mean? And really trying to understand people. You see it. Man, it's the essence of like most problems. And again, ego is what is just guarding us from just letting go and be like, hey, listen, what the fuck just let me listen to you for an hour. What do you really mean here? Because if you just let someone talk, if you get rid of your posturing, your stance, your ego, and you just learn from someone talking, you actually start to see things eye to eye and realize you're talking about a lot of the same things.
And sometimes, I mean, you see a lot of political problems, and like, there's always, like, if you have a hard political leaning, the other side is going to complain about stuff, and it's probably the same problems you have, it's just framed differently, incredibly differently. Like, they just have a wrong scapegoat for it that isn't yours. So it's like, we are all people together that have to live in a society. Like, these are not, like, the reason that life is hard is not these old people. Like, OK Boomer is really funny. Like, I think OK Boomer is one of the funniest things in a while, but it's super not helpful. Because it causes divisiveness,
right?
And these people aren't inherently the problem. Like, they're your grandparents. They're not the problem. Like, we have systemic issues that they didn't cause. Like, they have to deal with all the same shit that you do.
Right.
So
they're just, I mean, they're kind of thrown into this shit just as we are. I think that we're like, don't you understand that this is not real? And they're like, we don't know what else to do either, so we're just gonna stand here with our thing.
Well, and how can you ever expect them to just, what's the word I'm looking for? Adapt to, instead of, so I've read a statistic, and it's like, our grandparents are people above the age of 80. We've taken in more information by 25 years than they did for like 70 years. Like, they can't adapt to that. It's so incredible. It's overwhelming for me. And I try to read as much as possible and take in a lot of information. And it's overwhelming. So I can't imagine how these people feel in their age when they're not adapted to this.
Well, they're going to feel like their usefulness has been kind of dried up, right? Like, you don't call your grandma to, like, hey, what's the recipe for this? You just look it up online. And there's probably a better recipe than your grandma gave you nowadays. But that's a weird, how do we cope with shit like that even? And
I'm hard-pressed to say that their wisdom is actually just, it's not the best, because we have the internet and people, they grew up in a society that didn't value introspection or any of these things, and not no fault of their own. It's just not part of the culture here, and that they've just been fed like one news source. Like, all this information has been force fed to them, and they've just been like, this is just what they got. There's no other objective reality for them. So even their wisdom is just not as helpful now. So the one thing you're supposed to have when you're old is supposed to be an old wise man, which I think being aged and being wise are two different things, but the stereotypical old person is wise.
Of course.
And the internet has profound amounts of wisdom that they could barely grasp. Some of them. This is a very large blanket statement, but
No,
like a lot
of
the
course it's blanket statement. Yeah.
A lot of the old people I run into, I feel like that probably feels really bad. Like the one thing, I'm gonna be this old wise man, teach my kids all this stuff. But it's like
it'd be wonderful to have that.
But the internet just does it so much better.
Yeah, I mean, you read all these books, and then you discover that like reading 3 books, you pretty much get the summarizations of that by one 16-year-old kid watching a documentary on Netflix. And you're like, well, those 3 books took me 4 weeks, and that took him 44 minutes. So, I mean, not that it's the exact same information, but I was just thinking of an analogy, like, because I can't say that where you and I get our information, where we get our truth, where we get our news is perfectly more truthful and more reliable than where they get theirs. But we also do know a thing or two. We know like a lot of the news networks the news that is, Fox News, CBS, I don't really even know any of these. I'm not saying pinpointing exactly, but it's fed one wormhole of information. Like, this is what you care about at all times. And now there's 24-hour news. There's something that's breaking. There's something that's worth watching at all times. So I was thinking, when we say like, hey, this isn't the only truth, like when we're trying to explain to old people who are, watching the same news stations as they have been for 25 years, saying like, hey, this is biased. This isn't the whole picture. There's a whole world, this whatever. Imagine if we walked in when there was only TVs before the internet, and we walked into someone's home, they're sitting around, family dinner, 6 of them, and you're like, hey, what you're watching on this TV right now, I know that that's the president, but that's false. That is wrong. He's lying. It's not true. They'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course this is true. This is the most true thing ever. So the way that we get our truth in this world has been completely compromised. And old people, there's no way they can cope with that.
No, and they just have not been,
Again, blanket statement on old people.
Yeah. Being skeptical it's a skill you got to work up. You don't just like all of a sudden don't believe anything.
Right.
And these people didn't have to do that. Like, why would the news lie? Like, there's a very much so a systemic, all the news is set up to just piss them off and cause divisiveness. And I think that's why OK Boomer is funny, but also upsetting, because we're just adding to that. Like,
what's the OK Boomer? I don't know that.
Okay, so OK Boomer is like the comeback for when old people say like ridiculous stuff, or like they have just terrible political opinions. Like, it's a big meme. You're like, OK Boomer. Like, this is like the Stonewall Forum, and it's like going over the internet right now, which is funny. It's objectively pretty funny, but it's definitely
it's great.
Like, we can't be upset with these people. Like, we have to have incredible empathy for
they're
where
fucking
they're at.
people too. Like, what are we saying? Like, our opinions just because we're like, I'm no more important than other humans. Like, we're all living here. We have to figure out how we can.
I just think that the divisiveness is a problem, and I actually wanted to go over us versus them today.
Yes,
I wrote that down.
yeah.
Us versus them mentality
let's talk about that.
is just incredibly. That's one of the biggest ones I see is young people versus old people, especially because the political sphere is getting very heated right now because the election's coming up. Like, there's so much divisiveness, and there's a lot of like corporate entities that make a lot of money from causing divisiveness. So when we just like eat that all day, it's very easy to be angry. Like, oh, those are the other guys. Like, it's like the caveman brain just wants the enemy.
Right.
They want like an actualized, like, this person's the problem. Their opinions are bad, and I'm going to do everything against this person.
That's why we have justice, because we can, once we get that person, we can make them feel bad.
And so we just got to rise above that. I really, really try to not do that. It's extremely hard, because I really think the old people have terrible opinions. I really disagree with almost everything they believe in. But I can't let that dictate how I treat individual people.
Yeah. That's an us versus them right there. That's
like the self is extremely important when you're in groups. Like, that groupthink and that big, like, I feel good, I got my tribe behind me, all these people. We all, like, hate is so much more rallying than love.
It's easier.
And like, the corporatism, especially in like Western culture, really, really sells that to everyone. Us versus them is sold to us every single day. That feels super bad.
It's funny, it's this left, let's just say politics is a great example, red and white or left and right. It's like, you don't have to choose one of them. You don't have to talk about a person as if that summarizes exactly who they are, their entire being, because that creates right away that even our political system at its core creates an us versus them conversation. And so I was thinking though, so like we're having a conversation, we're saying, oh, we're young people, they're old people. I also think that there's a nervousness, there's a weirdness in like the Western cultural language where us versus them is even kind of a weirdo thing to talk about. I was just thinking about race. So if I'm talking about a black man, like saying black male or saying like Mexican, so like race, for example, talking about me versus them, like as a white man saying Mexican or a black person, that seems weird coming out of my mouth. Like it feels like I'm not used to talking about it or considering us versus them out loud conveying differences. But we seem we like ignore that conversation. And we're like, we're all equal in that sense. We don't even talk about like we're just people. I'm not black, you're not white. We're just people. We have that. But then when it comes to political shit, it's so fast to just, it's so comfortable to say, oh, you're a left wing or you're a right wing or whatever. Our conversation is so weirdo.
Are so aggravating. Like, they're so incredibly aggravating to talk about because, I don't know, if you just have strong opinions and somebody is divisively opposing you, like, it's like, this is what I think the good of all people is going to be, and you have somebody else who thinks the opposite of that, it's inherently just going to cause some friction.
Right.
And then it's just, you get the mob mentality, then you go find spaces where they're echo chambers and people only believe what you believe, and these ideas proliferate, they get more radical, and then you have like two entities of people that could not be more diametrically opposed.
Yep. They're solidified in a belief. I believe this, you guys believe this, we are that. But then it's like, in 10 years, like, what, are you still that? Like, if you look back and like, oh, here, what was I doing exactly 10 years ago on this day? Like, just stop and think about yourself in that moment, because you're going to be like, oh, I was representing that entire thing, saying that was my entire being. That's my whole, that's who I am. That's what I'm going to fight against the opposite of.
And this really goes back to the ego as well, because, I mean, you see it a lot in, like, zealotry of all kinds, but especially religious zealotry, because it's a belief that you've attached to yourself, and now anybody that's refuting it is attacking you and not a concept.
Right.
And that's very, like,
people are dangerous.
Yes, extremely dangerous. And if you can not identify with that on a personal level and like as a concept, it's very helpful.
Right.
Like, because then when you don't get like that ape reaction to like, oh, this is who I am. They're attacking my beliefs.
You don't
like,
have to be defensive.
They're attacking an idea. And I've gotten a lot of mileage out of not telling people which way I lean. And just talking about ideas and concepts, like, hey, this is the problem, or like policy, I guess. This is the problem. Let's converse about it, and I won't tell people how I lean, and that you will get so much further with people if you can, like, just do that.
Right. I think, so I definitely agree with that, but I also think that it has become okay to be in a constant state of contempt and say that that's a personality. And so a lot of times, like, oh, I'm so open to your opinion, right? And then as you're talking, I'm like, I'm making faces. I'm doing like that. Again, politics. Donald Trump does that, like the weird, like, oh, I'm not believing what you're saying. You're not actually listening. You're solidifying, I am this stance against your stance. And so we can't get anywhere from that. So, I mean, even just listening, the us versus them requires you to dissolve that. It requires everyone to be a better listener. And being a better listener means your body language, your face, your, like, just listen and let them talk too. That's another huge thing. I do want to really, just the us versus them thing, like that. So how would you define, I guess, just even that sentence, us versus them? Because I think it's a huge thing that we should definitely know. It helps a lot of our conversations.
I think it's really just like it's just the classic tribalism, you know, like it goes back to those caveman days when people that don't look like you from another tribe, they're like, coming to kill you, take all your stuff. Like, we just we've ideologically and technologically grown so fast, but we haven't shaken humanity and what we once were. So trying to navigate that on like
cell phones, bro.
Yeah, it's it's a
We're
hard
apes with
landscape.
pacifiers, as you texted me this morning.
Phones are the great pacifier of people. We'll get to that. I definitely want to talk about
we'll get
that.
to that. So us versus them, when we're having these conversations. So how do we, when people are listening, because even listening. So say the previous part of our conversation, we're talking about old people. If I was an older person, I'd be like what, you don't know, whatever. Like, you're talking about me, like whatever. You start to get a stance instead of just listening and trying to let them explain. Mm-hmm. So dissolving the us versus them mentality. I mean, mindfulness again, I guess.
I think it really comes down to humanizing people.
True.
It's so easy to dehumanize somebody that doesn't believe what you believe to like a very extreme degree. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, and then you label them like the caveman brain, and like it's actually very novel and good that we're extremely good at categorizing things. Mm-hmm. Like as humans, like it's just how we say that's how we survived. Like you see a snake, some snakes are poisonous, so this snake is poisonous or venomous rather, and you just believe that. So you put things in boxes and you compartmentalize them. When you start doing that to people, it does not lead to very helpful conversation. Mm-hmm. And just looking at people like from where they're coming from, I guess, like meeting people where they're at, essentially, because there's a reason they're upset, mm-hmm. and it's probably not what they're talking about. Like somebody either fed this to them as a solution to a problem they have that you also probably have. Right. Like trying to understand the root of someone's pain will help a lot in this.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That requires a very, very large deal of empathy. And it's also hard to give that to people you disagree with.
Empathy is a tough one, though, because I think that, the news, the world of news has also... Empathy is a weird thing. I think we misunderstand empathy and sympathy. Feeling other people's pain mm-hmm. is not super healthy all the time, because then it makes us pick up this pitchfork, like, I will avenge you. It kind of hits that core of our being. So being empathetic is super. We can talk about that in another podcast, but so sympathy. One thing that I do for that is that, like, how I'm able to be empathetic towards everyone. I feel like in my meditations, I always think of people throughout their whole life. So it's like, okay, say the subject is someone that you've had a disagreement with. And so I bring that person to mind, and I think about them 5 years ago. Like, what were they doing? Oh, maybe they were just getting their license. Maybe they were a young kid. Then 10 years ago, oh, they were a teenager. They were a kid. You think of someone as a whole being. They've had a whole life. They have a mother. There's these things that they're trying to protect, mm-hmm. right? They have a family at home. Their argument with you is just trying to make sure that shit doesn't go astray, right? Like, the essence of them is to just stay safe, just like it is for you. And so I think for me, like in meditations, and then just kind of think about it once in a while when you're having an argument or talking to somebody, like, man, this motherfucker has had a whole life. They've had a baby. They were a baby. Mm-hmm. That's who they were. They were a baby. They got a mom.
I really, So there's a ideology or a philosophy called Determinism, and it's basically predicated upon the fact that so the universe explodes and everything from then has led to you where you're at now, and you haven't got to choose any of that. So if it's like nature versus nurture, like that's what people say, like that's the argument. You don't really get to choose either of those things, and you will instinctively react to your environment anyways. So you haven't got to really choose who you are and how you got to where you are. It's just like almost by happenstance. Right. So looking at other people, like, if I was this person, I would be exactly the same way.
Exactly, you would.
Is incredibly humanizing, and it for me has led to a very large degree of empathy just mm-hmm. for everyone, even people that I like. You can't even fathom how they came to the conclusion they did, or why they are the way they are. Mm-hmm. But then thinking, man, I would be the same way if I was them.
Yeah, like you're gonna have that instant. So that's the thing is, so mindfulness puts a wedge in that instant reaction. So what we're talking about here is everybody has these reactions of like, you're an absolute idiot. What are you talking about? Or like this, you immediately compartmentalize someone into them. They know less than I do. They know they're wrong. But at the essence of what's going on, that you're just misunderstanding mm-hmm. each other. So when you can see someone as a whole being, you can practice mindfulness to put the wedge in and be like, okay, I can feel this anxiety raising up. I can feel this anger raising up. I'm not going to let that anger control what's coming out of my mouth. I'm going to stop and listen to them, let them talk. I'm going to wait for them to explain what they really mean, not just the words that they're saying. Right?
Yeah, intent is incredibly important, and we lose that a lot, I really think, because the ego, like you want to get the quip in, like you want to own this guy, like it feels so good, because like, oh, you're wrong, I'm right, and it just is so reassuring. But that is not helpful rhetoric, and it's not helpful for anyone involved. It just, usually if you want to change someone's opinion, you can't do that, like, because they will always double down every single time to protect their own ego. So
just as you would.
I would do the exact same thing. Yeah. So if you can facilitate people to just kind of leech it out of them, like get them to explain themselves, even if they're done, you really still don't disagree with them, at least you can now have a more open dialogue and maybe changing their mind. Because the moment you get on that back foot, the front of your brain that does a lot of cognitive reasoning shuts off, and just the stem will fire, and that's just caveman protection instincts.
Right.
So if you can keep people from like that fight or flight response when you're talking to them, you'll get a lot further.
And noticing when you've locked into that same response, if you're being defensive yourself.
Because I love being upset. I do. I love being politically outraged.
Especially right afterwards when you own someone in an argument, you're like, man, that felt good.
I've really been trying to get away from doing it because it does feel great. Yeah. Like it's hard not to sometimes.
It's not fucking helpful.
It's so not helpful. And when you look at like, we're all in this bitch together. Like we all got to navigate life. Like this person is trying their best, I'm sure.
Right.
Like, they have probably very similar problems to me.
Right.
It's just not helpful discourse, and it will further divide people. And not doing that is extremely helpful.
Yeah. That's all super important, man. I'm glad that we can kind of summarize things, and hopefully, that's certainly what I want to be doing over time is defining things a little better and allowing people to slow down and because a lot of what we're having trouble doing in our conversations in today's world is even getting to the conversation, because we hit these barriers of like, oh, you're wearing a red hat with that white writing on it, like I'm not even gonna let you speak. But it's just stopping things. So explaining things and really helping us see each other as humans, and just humanizing conversation to where we can actually talk to each other and realize, like, yeah, we're vastly different. We think way different things, but we're also with you hurling through fucking space on this big old rock.
Dude, once you really think about the absurdity of just existing, it's like boils everything down to just not. It's just like such a non-issue.
It is so silly.
Like we're spinning around a sun that's hurling through the universe with a galaxy that's also hurling through the universe, and like this petty argument, like it just is so not important.
And it's it's at the end of even just your small short life, each of us, there will be even this same laughing moment, right? Of like, oh man, that was so petty. You're not gonna be like, oh, thank goodness I owned that fucking leftist in that argument when I was 28. I mean,
it just,
what's important to you,
Yeah. I wrote a bunch of stuff. Oh, that phones are the great adult pacifier.
Oh, I definitely want to dip into that. What is so you texted me that this morning. Oh, dude. I think of that too. It's funny, this podcast, I feel like a lot of my episodes have been just like, social media sucks and phones are evil and all this stuff. Like, I mean, I'm addicted to all these things too, and I have my ways of branching with them as well. But so explain to me how my phone is a pacifier.
Okay. Well, if anyone goes to dinner in the U.S., you see everyone on their phone. And another thing we didn't touch on with meditation is it just causes you to be present. And the phone is the opposite of being present. And I've noticed that it's really detracted from my life and relationships. And it's led me with the dopamine tick is so important. I get so bored so fast from being so stimulated that I can't enjoy stuff ever. I can't enjoy it's extremely, extremely hard to enjoy just my everyday moments because I'm so used to just being blasted with information.
I know, man. We're constantly, we have everything we ever want. And then that's the truth of life, though, is everything you ever want is never enough. So, so the present moment certainly pulls us away, or the phone pulls us away from the present moment. What you want to define the present moment? Let's make sure that's clear.
Yeah. It really is. Well, I mean, it's quite literally now. And you can let it slip very easily by not paying attention to it or not being mindful of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you sit on Instagram and just look at shit posts, look at memes, and just intake all of this. You get a little laugh.
You get a little dopamine hit every time you click.
But it's not actually satisfying. It's just pacifying. Like this is not when I have this realization sometimes. I watch YouTube for 5 hours a day, and taking helpful information, but it's just way too much information.
Right. Same here.
And I will find myself down the rabbit hole, just watching stuff. And then I set my phone. I'm like, what do I really care about? What would I be doing right now if I wasn't doing this? There's definitely something that is more constructive.
If YouTube didn't just throw me down this, what would I care about?
Yeah. There's things that I do that bring me much more joy than this. And I'm choosing to do this right now. And I choose to do this a lot. Mm-hmm. I feel like others do as well. And it really detracts from...
Right. But it pulls you out of the present moment. I mean, but that's the thing is a lot of times you're learning, or you're enjoying, of course I'm pulled out of the present moment. I'm enjoying my life. I'm enjoying this thing. So why is the present moment even important then, Spencer, if we're just feeling better when we're doing 6 hours of YouTube?
Because it's ultimately not constructive to a point. Yes, seek your knowledge, learn your things, but there's a point of overstimulation in which you just cannot take anything else. And I find myself in this place quite a bit where I'm just very much so overblasted with information. And it's the little stuff. Like if you're watching YouTube and you run out your door, that sweet, decaying fall smell of all the dead leaves. There's so many things that are beautiful and mundane that you will 100% look over and you're never going to get back just because you're staring at your phone.
Right. So that's funny, the smell of the leaves, even that. So that's something I think that our ego helps us say oh, I'm just not into that sort of thing, right? You say oh, I'm not a fall person, or I don't like the outside, or blah, blah, blah. But these are naturally healing. These are just being a human. It's important to connect with these things. We get, oxygen and breath from the outside, from the trees. The being pulled constantly out of the present moment seems so, doesn't seem like a big deal when this is better. I'm holding up my phone here. Holding up my phone is better than reality, right? So if your life sucks at home, the present moment is a nice thing to escape from, right? But I think we're a little confused about what the present is. We think of it as here's my reality, not slowing down and being really breaking apart what it smells like in this room. What are the intricacies of how do things feel, and using our senses to really breathe in and stop and slow down and stop thinking so much and breathe that in.
That's really a core tenet of meditation as well. It's just anchoring the five senses and just taking note of sensory input. I don't know if that's how you meditate, but I mean, a lot of the times I really like to meditate with my eyes open because it's just nice.
A lot of people have good success with eyes open. I'm not someone who has a lot of eyes open, but a ton of people do very well with eyes open meditation.
I got to be really on top of meditating every day to get to the point where it's productive. Because I mean, you get the twitch, pick up your phone, do it. Anything, these little obtrusions on your consciousness, your stream of reality, and they just make you want to not do what you're doing. There's something so uncomfortable about doing nothing, and I feel like the old iPhone is a big part of that.
The old pacifier.
And I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, you see kids not being parented. Even I am criminally underpresent in my relationship, my love relationship.
Oh, right.
And just because, I mean, once you get really comfortable with people, I mean, you see it at dinner tables, you just, Well, I know how they feel. Like, why are we gonna talk about
Like
it?
we talked about all the things.
Yeah.
But so that's the thing is to search for the present moment and make sure you're always in the present. So I have that same thing because I used to be on my phone so much more often than I am now. And I'll have moments where I'm like, Shane and I will both be on our phone for like, let's say a minute at dinner. Yesterday, literally at Applebee's, we were on our phones. And I have moments now because I've kind of trained myself like, oh, let's lock back in that present moment. I'll put my phone down and I'll just, try to think of something like, hey, if a meteor hit right now, babe, what would you do? Like, what do you think would happen? And, all of a sudden you have a 20-minute wonderful conversation, so exploring wonder, talking about, like, you could even be like, hey, what do you think? Like, would you ever adopt a kid? Have those conversations. Just, I think that we also use the phone for things to talk about, right? I mean, gossip is man, it's something that I'm really trying to break apart. I'm reading Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens* right now, and he's talking about like gossip. Book. Oh man, I'm not super far into it, but it's so good so far.
It's very good.
But gossip, man, it's the phone. The click culture has fueled our gossip to where pretty much there's entire people who they're never talking about anything other than what's being regurgitated to them. Like, did you hear about this? 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 Man, I feel like that's almost taking our phone, and even though it's down, it's leaving our phone on because we're not in the present moment still. We're still carrying on this thing that's elsewhere over here. But anyway, yes. Yeah, so I was trying to round out in your relationship, in your, like, even our friendships. Once in a while, dude, like, you notice, like, of course we love being on our phone. Of course, Reddit's great, YouTube's great, Instagram, whatever. But once in a while, you gotta be like, let's try to be creative here. Let's try to explore my fucking life and not just use the whole thing on my phone. Put your phone down, look at the person across to you, say what's happening, what's going on, like, let's talk about something in depth.
And I've personally found it so much more enriching to just have a conversation. Because what's on this guy is really just, it's never positive. Positive news doesn't sell.
Yeah, it doesn't sell.
So you're being sold that you're inadequate. People trying to sell you stuff, and the best way to sell you stuff is to make you feel like you're less than currently. It's like, oh, if I have this thing, I'll be better. And all these sites, that's just what they're doing. And all the gossip, I mean, it's just programming your brain to want that for your own life. I mean, I take naps every single day, and I'll be like watching YouTube, and I'll go to sleep, and I'll have like pretty vivid dreams that are very, very similar to what I was watching. And it's really heartened me to believe that what you intake like weighs so heavily on your subconscious.
Right.
And if you intake just garbage all the time, like he said, she said, like all the celebrity gossip, like all this negativity, like it really does affect you. Right. Even if you don't realize it, like it really changes who you are and how you react to the world and what you seek out for pleasure as well.
Oh, it absolutely does.
So if you go have a really constructive conversation or just like something fun, like something playful, like that's so much more helpful for you, like as a person, than staring at that screen. Right.
Yeah. It's the screen, the phone is kind of like that shortcut to the chemical reaction that happens. Like, so when if you are unaware listener, when you pick up your phone and you click on something, so if you get the notification ding and you hear that and you immediately pick up your phone and you click like, all right, got it. That is the chemical dopamine is being released in your brain. That's how it works. You get dopamine from picking up your phone, but you also get dopamine from having wonderful conversations. You get dopamine from what isn't dopamine like the reward chemical?
Yes, it's very misunderstood, like in like common terms, but it is the reward you get.
Yeah, like checking something off your list. Like, oh, I did that thing, or I got that thing. Like, I posted that thing and I got this from posting that. I did good. Is it that sort of?
Yeah, it's your brain's way of rewarding you for doing something that would increase survival chances. So like eating, dopamine.
Right.
Like all these things, like sex, dopamine.
Yes.
Like all these things that feel really good.
Yes. And we've been evolutionary like designed to, if these things are happening to you, it must mean you're doing pretty good, because a lot of people have just died. Like, I mean, it took us a while to have a sustainable culture to where we don't have to worry about just surviving. It's like you're doing good. You're getting that dopamine. Good. That's what you want, is to stay safe. And
Yeah, like polio's or penicillin's less than 100 years old. So like
That's
people
so
from just like
mind-blowing.
dying from everything not very long ago, like two people ago.
2 people ago.
But with a lot of people have ADHD as well from the phone, I really believe,
Yeah.
because that dopamine. So all Adderall does is increase your dopamine levels, which inherently allows you to focus. Because the lack of dopamine, people or the brain is set up to seek novelty, to feel stimulated.
Right.
That's why, like, if you get into something like music's a really good example. You get into like the real light poppy stuff. In like 4 years, you'll listen to like underground music that's got like 400 followers, and he's doing it out of the basement. Like, so you will always go more and more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And this constant like blast of dopamine makes it incredibly hard to focus when things are more mundane than that. And it's just so much input that just sitting seems hard.
Right. It's super hard to focus, man. That's the thing. It's so hard to focus because we're used to, we kind of, when we're online, we kind of let our minds rip. You don't have to focus. You can look, oh, there's an ad, oh, there's this thing, oh, this person, I'll like that one quick. We kind of let it rip. I feel like sometimes the ADHD brain is kind of trained by just the nature of phones.
Yeah, even on a neurochemical level, I think it's incredibly enhanced, just because you now live at a heightened state of dopamine because of your phone, and then you sit down to read, not as stimulating, not colorful, not loud. It's not so novel.
Right.
It's very, very hard.
Well, and so that's the thing, is finding things that you're interested in that aren't gossip and what so and so is doing, and that's why we've got to be finding things that we're interested in that aren't just negative to us. So what I mean by that is something that's stimulating. So if you're sitting through a lecture of something about music and you love music, you're going to be paying attention, you're going to be attentive. But if you're not interested in music at all, you're not going to be paying attention. So finding something that stimulates you other than gossip and passing the time.
And I feel like we have really gotten the short side of this when it comes to all our hobbies need to be lucrative in general. So a lot of them are very vain, very shallow. Like talking about big concepts and being really interested in like a lot of these things that don't make a lot of money is not very culturally supported.
Right.
So just being sold things
Right.
all the time.
Well, we're always thinking of the right now, right? We're thinking of how do we get this right now, the soonest, not how do we enjoy our life in the long run.
Yeah, and you really feel or see people, like I really wish that people didn't shame each other for stuff that they like in general, because it's like you get the stereotypical like young person, like male or female, like you probably guess what they're into more than likely, like with the 80% accuracy, like because we just are kind of like this homogenized, like this is what's culturally cool. There's not a lot of introduction to a lot of like other things that could be really enriching. I think
Seriously.
I think it's a big problem.
Yeah, man. It's crazy though. So much. I mean, it's nice that just this conversation. I'm thinking, like, just looping back, like everything we're talking about, it can loop back to ego, to being mindful. And these are such important concepts.
It really is such an anchor for everything we've talked about, I really think, because like people, I mean, I always say there's nothing more disappointing than meeting someone they're exactly who you think they are. Like they're just like really normal, and like that heteronormativity is like so championed.
Right.
Like, you just got to be normal. Everyone wants to be normal.
Yeah.
Normal is very boring.
Yeah,
really,
it's boring to us too.
Yes.
And we notice that within ourselves and within each other. We know when we're not being our authentic selves. We feel it. Our ego reacts to it, and we know when other people aren't being either, because it puts this weird non-trusting in our conversations.
Mm-hmm. And I really think that, well, even like Netflix, like sitcoms are my favorite example of pacification, because it's just like it's so comfy. It's just the most comfy media. It's not challenging, which some people my life's extremely easy. Like I don't have a lot of like real actual issues that I don't cause for myself. So like all my problems are my fault, and I'm fully aware of that. So it's probably nice to come home after like a long day that was pretty shit and like watch a sitcom. But that is like just like a baby food for your brain.
It is.
Like it's just some people also don't really like to research. Like that's a personality type definitely, and like to be like challenged in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to empathize with them because it's like that's all I really enjoy. It's just like new, really crunchy information.
Right. We both love novelty.
Yeah, but then I think that your personality becomes the office then, and you get this extremely homogenized person from it.
Right.
Like just from the media that we consume as young people. Like this is my sense of humor. Like we're all into these like pretty bland things that just like help us pass time and never really question anything or talk about anything grand.
But what we don't see is right beneath our eyes as we're doing these things. They're becoming who we are. You know, if you do the same thing every day for 30 days, it's, whether you want it to or not, it's kind of who you are. You know, it's shaping your personality at least, right?
You're just a sack of habits chasing 3 brain chemicals.
Just a bunch of mush under there, Yeah, you've got to, I mean, there's certain people that, you know, there's a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, but I think that the way that life just inherently is now, especially in the Western culture, it's like you have to realize that if you don't have an active growth mindset, then society and the internet and your phone is going to make you into their fixed mindset. They're gonna send you on their wild goose chase. That's gonna be your interests. They're gonna give you an ego to use.
I've got a lot of really hard criticisms of capitalism in general.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that like the growth mindset is even misconstrued because of it, because it's like monetary gain is what's prized here. Like that's what we flex. You know, you wear the chains, you drive the car, and this is who I am. Like all of our like economic system is based around consuming and then being what you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite things is you climb up the corporate ladder, you get to the top, you realize you're on the wrong building.
Right.
Yeah,
I like that.
it's just and it's incredibly predatory. You see when you pick up your phone too. Everyone's just trying to sell you stuff, make you feel bad. And I think that like that model just like constantly, like you just are selling your time and buying stuff. Like that's what you're here. Be quiet, don't make noise, sell your time and buy stuff. Like that's the loop. And that growth mindset can be very much so sold to people through like a lot of self-help books to just make you make more money, to buy more stuff.
Right. It sucks, man. I mean, I think it's worth talking about, though. It's worth having these conversations, and it's worth trying to teach people and trying to make sure people know it's like, hey, I'm not trying to judge you. I'm not trying to like tell you, you know, that I'm better than you in any way. It's like I'm trying to make you realize that your attention's being sold to you. I'm trying to make you realize that what you care about throughout your life should be your own decision, and it shouldn't be your primitive chemicals being used against you, which is the world that we're living in, and it's creating way too much divide. And
it just causes this sense of it's not fulfilling at all. I mean, you buy a new car, you like it for 2 months, then you stop washing it. It's just like how you get to work.
Yeah.
Like this thing that you work so hard for is just but a little bit of satisfaction. And it's what's next. Like, I feel like a lot of depression, anxiety come from systemic reasons that we just are like thrusted into this world. You're just like here to make money, man. Just here to work.
Dude, we're not here for that. That's something that's like, sure, you got to play that game. Culture is a real thing. Society is a real thing. You got to exist in this world. But like the essence of who you should be at the end of every day is just someone who's trying to learn what this is all about, right next to a bunch of other people trying to learn what this is all about.
And that harkens back to the ego too, because selling you stuff is so ego pandering. It is. I've had a massive ego in the past. Like, want the nicest car, want just big muscles, and I want everyone to think I'm smart and funny and huge.
Yeah, totally.
And whatever I could buy to make that happen, I would. Whatever like attention I could get just from monetary purchases, 100% would do that. And it's really hard to not be like that because we've just been raised in a culture that's just how it is.
But so here's the thing: is the jump that was always something that I couldn't understand at the moment until I was introspective about it later. Is in the moment, you don't realize you are doing these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're like, what are you talking about? This is who I am. I'm just buying these things that I like. I'm just doing these things. But what we're saying is the essence of why you're doing these things is your ego,
Mm-hmm.
that's what your ego is. And you don't have to bow to it.
This has actually unintentionally been an excellent podcast about ego.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like podcasts, dude. I feel like the essence of ego, it's such a confusing concept. I told you, I've been doing so much research around the word ego because I feel like in my head, I want to be able to explain it in like 2 sentences to people, but I'm not there yet by any means. So I think that, I mean, you'll be on this podcast more often anyway, and we're going to have these more conversations in depth about ego. And I mean, we talked about mindfulness and all these things that loop together. I think over time, listeners will really have a great grasp on ego and why it's important to understand.
And I don't know if it's just what we chose to talk about all pander to the ego, or if everything, like all the human decisions you make, really revert back to that.
Oh God.
I would like to keep an eye on that as
So
we
how do
continue to talk.
Yeah, because when you keep floating, I mean, and what happens in conversations where you keep floating above ego and keep floating, like the better you get, you kind of go this meta above the conversation. Like of course, we both still have egos, but we're creating this third part of the conversation.
Definitely pretty big at some point in times.
Yeah.
Like I am extremely, at my core, pretty argumentative. Love to be the smart guy. I like to be right.
Right.
I want to be the strong one. Like, definitely just want to be that guy. Like at my being, that's just how I've always been. So trying to release that has been pretty hard, just in general. Like it's like not like, oh no, I lost it. It's like every day you got to really work on it.
Right, dude. You got to. It's when you notice that it's your natural state. I always like Aubrey Marcus. He always talks about. He calls himself a monster. He's like, dude, at my being, I'm a monster. Like I gotta push these things out. I gotta attack them. Like I know that, like I have these things, but they're not always productive to my conversation. They're not always productive to what brings me forth in life. So,
I feel like you'll definitely succumb to them more than once. And
right.
I really want, like, any listener is gonna like really start to delve into this. If you fail, that's part of it. You're gonna fail for the rest of your life. That's just how it is. Like you're gonna fail sometimes, and that is more than acceptable. And you just have to take note of it and be better.
Yeah. You're not failure just as much as you're not your ego. You're not these other things we're talking about. You're also not failure. You just got to restart the next day. And that's the thing is, it's not like, oh, I failed, now I got to redo it. It's like, no, you never really fail if you think about it. It's just like, oh, well, I didn't get to where I wanted to be today. Tomorrow, no doubt in my mind, I'm going to start that same thing. I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to pick up where I left off.
So what did we learn today kind of thing? Not oh, I failed today, now I can beat myself up. Like actually journaling is really helpful.
Definitely.
For this.
I'm a huge advocate of journaling.
Scribing is definitely important. I don't do it enough, but it's definitely really helpful because then you can see progress too. You go back like 2 months, you look at what you're writing about.
That's something that I like looking back at my notes. I'm getting there now. It's some sort of weird block that I have. I have so much work that needs to be, oh, here's some rough draft. Let's go sketch it out and make it a final. Reading back my journal and reading back my thoughts. But it is important. It's something that I'm also working on. So to work on all these things, journaling definitely helps. Mindfulness meditation, there's plenty of apps. I mean, you search the word mindfulness meditation anywhere nowadays. Like, you just follow the directions. I promise it will help with ego, with seeing people as other, with your emotions getting out of control, with all these concepts. Mindfulness meditation. You
don't even necessarily have to meditate, but the incessant study of these things is helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
Devoid of that, because it just allows you to actually see what's happening. I will say that I've taken like pretty long breaks after starting meditating and then fallen off and then get back on it, and my emotional state is so much more varied when I don't meditate. Like I find myself being reactive much more so than I normally would be if I was meditating consistently.
Do you notice it in the moment, like, oh shit, like 2 minutes ago I just did that? Or do you notice it, say like, oh, I meditated this week, I noticed last week I kind of was a jerk, huh? Is it retrospectively or?
it depends how long I've meditated for. Like I probably meditated for like 6 weeks, and by the end of it, I just kind of found myself back on my bullshit,
Right.
doing all the stuff, like, I don't know, just my habits, just
Mm-hmm.
doing my habits mindlessly, like careening through days, looking at my phone, not taking note of things, and just like not living now
Mm-hmm.
at all to any meaningful degree, and it really detracted from like my day-to-day experience.
Right.
There's a saying that I really like that Aubrey Marcus says,
Hit me with it.
today's a good day to die.
Today's a good day.
Like, if you just live in a way that you be content with, hey man, I lived, I laughed, I danced, I played today, I
Yeah.
had a good day.
I like that.
If I die today, that'd be acceptable. Like, I lived my life to the utmost potential today.
Right. Yeah. Don't put all like I have done everything I've wanted to in this life and I'm good to die now. It's not like that. It's just today in this moment I'm being what I can be. I have done what I can do today.
And I don't want to misconstrue that with like being physically productive. Like, oh, I checked all my list off. It's really just like
Right.
enjoying the intricacies of conversation and laughing and letting yourself just genuinely enjoying every second of the day.
Did you slow down? Did you maybe take a breath outside just 1 second extra longer and breathing in like, man, I'm so grateful for my backyard. I'm grateful for I think gratitude definitely helps. Like a good day to die today, it's definitely like you need gratitude to be able to feel grateful for today being that good day.
Most certainly. I'm very lucky. I've got a very excellent family dynamic. I still live with my parents. They're just very good people. I walked in my house about 2 a.m. one night and I was like, I'm so thankful that this is a place of like happiness for me. Like,
Right.
I know that many people walk in their house and it's a source of pain.
Right.
And like to think about your safest space being like a place of discomfort to any real degree is just so unfortunate. I've like was very, very gracious of it.
Yeah, dude.
Just stuff like that.
Yeah, that's that sparks something in me that I'm very grateful of my space here as well. It's just cool to see. You're someone who I had a riddled upbringing. And you're someone who like we talked about multiple times today. Like you've had it great. You say you've had your own experiences, of course, just as anybody has. But to know that you're still grateful for like having a home. Because I'm so grateful for what I have here. But for me, I'm so grateful because there was, many years of my childhood where my feet were in the air. I was homeless, it's like I didn't have a consistent, that place. And so, man, I just want to say thanks for being grateful in your own life. Cause it just is like, I think it's so important that you're taking time to be grateful for what you have and not being, greedy about it. Cause there's plenty of people who, greedy is not the right word. There's plenty of people who just aren't grateful for what they have. And there's a lot of people who would love to have anything that they have. And that's such a cliche thing that you hear all the time, but it's important to your life. It's not that you owe this person, you should be grateful because this person has left. It's like it has less. It's a gratitude that you give to your life.
You are really just cheating yourself by not being grateful for what
Right.
you have, to be honest. Because it really doesn't affect anyone else but you, for the most part. Like, if you just are constantly, and if you're not grateful, you live in a constant state of discontent. And that's very unfortunate. Because then you will seek outside sources for contentment and you'll never be grateful for it. I was at lunch with like a multi-millionaire gym owner for like a business lunch, and his kid was there with him. He's probably like 14. I was about 18. And we were on the water on the East Coast, and he was complaining to his father that their yacht's not big enough. And at that moment, I was like, wow.
What a sentence.
That's insane. This is madness.
Right. Well, and the thing about it, though, is that kid, he was 8, or no, you were 18. He was, what, 14?
He was probably like in sophomore year of high school.
Right. So
It's
that's
not
the thing
very
is he's not born like he just knows all this language. He knows gratitude. He knows all these things. Like he knows about yachts. I mean, he needs to be taught these things. Like you have to be able to take a second and slow down, and he needs to have a way of that being taught to him. These are things that as parents, it's important for us to do. Like you need to show your kid why they're grateful for what they have.
It's a tenet of stoicism to go live with the poor for a few days.
Right.
And get in touch with the people.
It's probably honestly important. It's probably great. I mean, I know Megan went over to South Africa, Ghana, I think, and she was there and helped out and taught at like a school and stuff for a month. She came back and she was like, man, it's obviously eye-opening. That's a pretty profound way to go about it. But seeing people with less definitely makes you grateful for what you have.
And I love when people go to Africa. I've never been, but when they
Right.
come back and they're like, everyone was so happy there. Like, they're just so grateful for every little
We have
piece.
more, and we're content with not much.
Not much. That's why stuff doesn't matter. Like, stuff is not
No.
important.
Stuff sucks.
Stuff is definitely perishable, and you will get over it. But if you can't find, like, the wherewithal to just accept what it is, or, like, who you are, or what's happening around you, and just, like, genuinely take in the good parts and enjoy them,
Right.
you're just going to constantly be sad, be discontent.
Yeah.
And I see that with body issues a lot. So I'm a personal trainer, and if people, you got to enjoy the process. Like, if you're like, I will be happy when I get here, you're never going to be happy, because when you get there, you want more. But if you can find it in your being to accept yourself now,
Right.
you will be content the whole way.
Yeah. You can't put your happiness in the outcome because you don't control the outcome. I've heard that analogy with tennis players. So, like, I will only be happy, like Serena Williams, I'm only going to be happy and proud of myself if I win. But you don't have control over that. If this person is more physically, and if they're better at this game or whatever happens and they win this game, you can't control that. But what you can do is you can be present and you can go give it your all, and you can be content with the outcome that you gave your 100%, whether you won or lost.
And if you have the first mindset, who does it hurt ultimately? It doesn't change the outcome. If you lose and you are only going to be happy if you won, you're the only one suffering from it.
Right.
So we really just create our own torment to some degree.
We create our own fear, and then we get into a boxing ring and we try to box it.
I really don't like capitalism. People are definitely going to find that out.
Capitalism, huh?
Well, I mean, because it's
Go on, comrade.
It's the winning mindset. Gotta win.
Yeah,
Gotta
right.
do all those things. There's no. It's all about efficiency. No time to live now. I gotta live tomorrow. I gotta do all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not
What's
gonna lead to happiness.
What's the point of that? You don't get to the end, do you? Like, you don't get to the end like, all right, well, I won. See you later. Good night. I'm gonna go die.
Just go do stuff for other people.
Yeah, your life is in between.
And you just end up, I mean, if you're really good at it, you end up on a pile of gold alone, realizing you didn't cherish a single moment because you're running that rat race.
I'd rather, what was the saying? Mike Studd had a lyric. I'd rather be broke than rich alone. I always like that one.
Dude, Scrooge McDuck on the pile of gold, sad man.
Very sad man. Yeah. Scrooge McDuck. Well, Spencer, let's round it out. Is there anything that you want to go over one more time for listeners?
Let's take a look.
Let's definitely take a look.
Oh, just live like today's a good day to die.
Live like today is a good day to die.
Yeah, just like really think about that and enjoy the present moment as much as you can.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's very important. Spencer Hicks, I love you so much, man. I'm glad to have you on the podcast. I'm glad to have you a million times more, I hope. Thanks to your friendship and your conversation and your enlightening words to this world, man.
Yes, thank you.
I love you, bro. Hey, if you enjoyed that podcast, go ahead and give it a like, give me a follow, whatever you got to do on the social media thing. Make sure to send it to a friend if there's somebody in your life that you think would benefit from any of the things that we discussed in this podcast. And, of course, pay attention to whatever app you're using. They're going to autoplay some song or podcast or YouTube video next. So just be wary of your day. Be conscious. Stay mindful. Have a good day. Junkyard Love Podcast out.